What's up, people? Third time's the charm. Ape Analytics is back with video number 3 in his Python for Analytics series. Today, we are going to talk about groups of things, specifically lists, dictionaries, and tuples. First off, lists. You can have lists of pretty much anything. You can have lists of strings. Let's say I want to build a Pokemon team. I would create a list that I would call Pokemons. And in there, I would put 6 Pokemons. First one would be Charizard. And last but not least, Magikarp. But you can mix data types in a list. I can build a list that I would call nonsense. And in there, I'd put Boolean, true. Check out my previous video if you don't know what that is. A number, like 88. And a string, like KFC. You can even have lists of lists. For the sake of the example, I could have my Pokemons list and my nonsense list in a list. The cool thing about lists is that I can access their elements based on their index, which is their position in the list. The confusing thing about lists, and about Python in general, is that indexing doesn't start at 1, but it starts at 0. Therefore, Pokemon's square brackets 0 actually returns the first element of the list. Pokemon's 1 returns the second element in the list, in that case Pikachu. You can also start from the end, the last element of the list being indexed -1. To do that, you write the name of the list, square brackets, -1, and you get Magikarp. To get the next element from the list starting from the end, you just do -2. Articuno. There's all sorts of functions that you can use on lists, one of them being len, which you can use to find out the length of a list, how many elements are in there. You just write len, bracket, then the name of your list. It returns 6, because I have 6 Pokemons in my team. You can also slice a list, which means take a subset of it based on 1, 2, or 3 parameters. Pokemon's square brackets 0, 2 returns the first 2 elements of my list. Here is what happened. The first digit, 0, is the position of the first element I want to retrieve. The colon describes the range, and 2 is the final element. But it actually retrieved the one just before, index 1, which, as we know, is the second element in the list. If I change these 2 to a 3, I will have returned 3 elements in the list, the first 3. If I change the 0 to a 1, I retrieve 2 elements, the second and the third. As I said, you can add another parameter to slice lists. To do that, you simply add a column here and a number, and that number is the step. If you put 1, it will return every element in the range. But if you put 2, it will skip 1 element. It will return every other element. If you put 3, it will skip 2, and so on and so forth. So the default is 1, but if, say, I put 2 and I take a slightly bigger range, like from 0 to 4, I only get Charizard and Snorlax, because I took the first 4 elements, but I excluded element number 1 and element number 3. Obviously, you can leave some of these parameters blank, and a cool trick is this one. You call your list, then you do colon -1, and you get your list in reverse. Pretty cool, I think. Another cool thing about lists is that you can change some or all of their elements. And to do that, you just assign a new value to the element that you want to change. For instance, here I'm changing index 5, my last Pokemon in the list, to Eevee. And I will call the list again so that you can see how it has changed. At the end, I have Eevee now. You can also add elements to a list. To do that, you can use the append method. So let's create two empty lists first. I'm going to call them list 1 and list 2 because I don't have much imagination right now. And in list 1, I will put some characters. For instance, the letter Y. I will also add the letter O. And in list 2, I will add the letters L and O. If I check what's in list 1, you can see that now I have the two letters that I've added using the append method. I can do the same with list 2. And I can also concatenate lists in Python. So you just write down the name of your first list, followed by the name of your second list, and then you run that. Pretty straightforward. You can also check if things are in a list, and that will return a boolean. Again, if you want to know about boolean, check out my previous video. To do that, you use the term int. For instance, is 88 in nonsense, the list that we've created at the beginning? The answer is true. I can check if YOLO is in nonsense. The answer is false. Now, trick time. Strings in Python are kind of lists in a way. Let's say I have a string. Python live yo. I can check the first character in that string just like I would do in a list using square brackets and 0. That's P. Similarly, I can check the last character in that string using -1. And I can also reverse that string quite easily using the trick I showed you, colon, -1. Another great thing about lists is list comprehensions. The syntax is a bit weird, so bear with me. First, let's consider this list with integers ranging from 1 to 5. You start with a square bracket. Then you put some variable, let's call it x. Then you write 4, x, in, then the name of your list, my ints in that instance. I get my full list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the point of list comprehensions is that you can filter your results. To do that, you just add if, and then, for instance, x is strictly greater than 2. And that only returns 3, 4, 5, because these are the elements of my list that are strictly greater than 2. But you can actually do even more with list comprehensions, because not only can you filter, but you can also transform the elements of the list. To do that, you simply recycle the code I've written above, and you can add, for instance, 2 multiple signs and a 2 up there. That's the Python for square. And Python will return a list of 3 elements that are strictly greater than 2, and then square them. We can now move on to dictionaries that you can recognize with their curly brackets. Let's consider this dictionary for Charizard. You can see that I have categories like health and attack, and after a column, the points for that category. Official Pokemon stats, by the way. These categories are called keys, and the points are values. The keys method will return the keys of my dictionary. And the values method, guess what, will return the values. You can see, by the way, that I've mixed integers and Boolean values in that dictionary. Because just like lists, you can have different data types. And just like lists, you can modify a dictionary's elements. For instance, I can say that Charizard's health is now 100. See? 100 health points. The third and final group of things that I'd like to talk about is the tuple. I don't consider tuples as useful as lists and dictionaries, but you are bound to encounter them at some point. For instance, let's consider tuple 1, and in there I'm going to put 1 and 2. Actually, you don't even need the brackets. You can just write tuple 2 equals 3 and A, because you can mix data types in a tuple as well. Like lists, you can access the elements inside a tuple using square brackets and the index. For instance, tuple 2 square brackets 1 will return the second element of tuple 2, which is A. But unlike lists, you can't change a tuple's elements. Fancy people say a tuple is immutable. Let's try it anyway because we're crazy. Tuple 1, first element. Let's say I want to put 100 in there. I get an error. Specifically, a type error. Tuple object does not support item assignment. So tuples are not as flexible, I would say, but the benefit is that it makes them faster than lists, for instance. Last thing I'd like to touch on today is the type function. It's a pretty useful function to find out what something is. If I say type bracket Charizard, it returns dict for dictionary. Type nonsense, return lists because that's a list. Type tuple 1 returns tuple because we've created that tuple. It also works on things like integers. Type 1/3 is a float, which means a real number. Type ape analytics is a string, and we can go pretty meta with type. For instance, what's the type of type? That's type, pretty tight. My mind is blown. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment to let me know what you think I would like to see next.